Hi everyone, I'm Claire Batkin from Your OT Tutor. In this video, I wanted to give you a run through of one of the resources that I have available free for download on my website about hosting student placements. So what I've got is an ebook that's called Am I Ready to Host an Allied Health Student Clinical Placement? And it's got 10 questions that you should ask yourself when you're preparing to offer a placement, just to see, one, if you're ready to offer a placement, what logistics you might need to set up, plus also to help you decide maybe what type of placement might work for you. So I'm going to share my screen with you and just run you through that. And then I'll show you what's on the website as well, if you'd like any more information. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. I'm just going to be looking to the side so I can read it as we go through. So when you go to the website, I'll show you where you can find it at the end. You can download this for free. That's what it'll look like. So I am an OT. It's written from an OT perspective, but a lot of the tips that I've provided in this resource are transferable across a lot of allied health clinical placements. So non-OTs are welcome to have a look if you think it could be helpful. Okay, so you go through a little bit about me. So my business is called Your OT Tutor, and it's a clinical education focused business. So I've got lots of different courses and resources and a journal club. Plus one of the things which I'm talking about today is resources for supporting student placements. So this is the checklist. So these are my top 10 considerations for, in particular, this was written with small providers or those smaller companies or even sole traders that were looking at hosting student placements. So some of the really big national companies with lots of branches and things may need to do things a little bit differently. But this one was written particularly with all those sort of the smaller companies in mind. So rather than reading the list, I'm going to take you through, because on the next pages, a little bit more about me and this resource. This is where we'll actually go through one by one what those questions were. So the first question is all about admin efficiency. So do you have administration processes and resources streamlined to increase the efficiency of placement tasks? So one of the big daunting things for supervisors or potential supervisors, or the reason why you may not offer a placement in the first place, is you hear that they're very time consuming. There's so much paperwork to do, all these forms and things like that. How am I going to get through all that? So here are a few tips. So what I would suggest is that if you're looking at taking on students and you want it to be a long-term thing, not just a one-off that you'll never take on again, then start to actually put together a kit of resources. So that could include information sheets that you send to students. It could include some self-directed learning resources so that they can be working on things outside of time with their supervisor. So many different things that you could include. And on my website, what I've got is a clinical educator starter kit. There's a link in the resource that will take you there. And basically it's got 40 plus resources of all those different things, some orientation templates, some letters for students, some guides for supervisors, and some sort of self-directed activities for students as well. Basically that's there to get you started. They're white labeled. You can go in and change them, use them as you like. But basically just make that setting up your own kit a little bit quicker to do. So that's sort of the one thing, is to actually have a kit. If you'd like to have a go at creating your own, I even have on my website like a little 5-day challenge where I take you through how to create step-by-step 5 of those resources. So again, I'll show you where you can find that on the website, and you can just do that at your own leisure and see whether, one, you've got the time to create a whole kit, or whether it may be worth looking into the one that I've got available. So that's the one thing, is the kit. Another thing to consider is if your team is large enough, and it may only be sort of a team of 10 clinicians, is do you have space for a clinical educator role? So rather than each individual clinician, whenever there's a new student, they sort of take the reins with setting up the student up, sending out all the correspondence. If you're planning to take students regularly, sometimes it's helpful to have a dedicated person as a clinical educator, because then everything becomes much more familiar to them. They can develop a relationship with the university, and all the systems and processes just seem to work a lot more smoothly. So if they're large enough, maybe dedicate it to that one person, and it can improve the efficiency of all those admin things. When you're putting together all your processes, your resources, or if you do nominate a clinical educator, just make sure you don't become reliant on that one person and their brain and their memory. If something happens to them, they move on, they're on leave, they're sick, you want somebody to be able to take over that role pretty quickly. So just make sure you keep a record, paper trail of all the different processes, resources that you've got available, so that it can be shared amongst the team. Question 2 is all about client contact. So number 2 is, are your clients open to having students involved in their care to ensure students can actively participate in sessions? So that is really the key thing. Unless you're offering some sort of project placement, which is more based on maybe like a quality improvement activity, any of those face-to-face clinical placements need to provide opportunities where the student is actually doing the role of the therapist or whatever is appropriate for their year level. So that means actively speaking to patients, actively being involved in the assessments or the treatment sessions. They can't just be passive observers, particularly in those later year levels when you really need to be able to assess their ability to do those things themselves. So it could be that you don't have a lot of clients consistently, so it'd be hard to be able to guarantee that amount of clients for them to see. Or it could be that you have a really complex caseload. It could be a medico-legal caseload. It could be clients with significant or really mental health type trauma conditions, and it's not appropriate for a student to just come in and sort of take over sessions on an ad hoc basis. So just think about whether you do have any students, any clients that would be appropriate for students to actually be actively involved in. And if not, it could be more so that it's appropriate to do more like an observational type placement where the student's really only there for a day or so and not expected to really lead any of that assessment. Or it could even be that a project placement is better for the actual offer that you can make for your workload. So that's one thing. Check you've got enough active participation potential. Make sure that your clients, you don't just assume the clients will be happy to have students involved, particularly in the private sector when they may be paying out of their own pocket. If you're expecting that students will just take over some of those sessions, actually suss out whether your clients would be happy for that to happen. Put together some resources that would explain what it would look like for the client so that they can really make that informed decision and let you know. Also good that if you have a fluctuating caseload and you're like, oh, I think I can, but there could be some quiet times, as part of your resource kit, actually having some self-directed activities that are really case study focused or really practical focused. So, practicing assessments or putting together treatment plans or group sessions, having some activities like that that are more than just sort of reading a textbook or reading some articles can still sort of help fill that gap if you do have a bit of a fluctuation, where they can still demonstrate their clinical reasoning and maybe some of those skills that you'll need to assess them on. So that's the main gist of that one. We keep going to number 3, which is, will the student have an appropriate space to work in? So you're considering things like ergonomics, privacy, internet access. So if you've got a central meeting place, workplace, often all these things are there and it's easy. If you're someone that works from home or a home office or mobile therapist, then it can be a little bit more tricky, and doesn't mean it's not possible, but there are a few logistical things just to keep in mind. And something to let the universities know when you're making your offer, because there could be some students where they just don't have a space where they could work from their own home, or where they could go to access a library and all the things that they need to be able to participate in their placement. So students can work from home if they do have the necessary setup, but like I say, let the universities know. You could even, there's no technically rule saying that they can't work from your home office, but that will be an individual university sort of decision to make, and you probably will need to go through some sort of work health safety checklist just to show that they've got an ergonomic setup and that they'll be safe if they are in your home office. And even just things like, do you have pets? Make sure you let the university know so they don't send someone with a pet allergy as your student if you're going to be working from a home office. But also remember there are public venues available. So libraries often have meeting spaces that you can use for free, and they will have internet access for free, all those sorts of things. So there are ways around it, even if you don't have a central meeting place. But just consider that and make sure you're really upfront with the university when you're making your offer so that they can match the student that's actually going to suit really well. Keep going to number 4, which is all about the clinical notes or documentation. So will the student be able to easily access client notes in a secure manner compliant with privacy requirements? So obviously the storage and how we use information, how the students can access client notes is really important. So keeping in mind sort of whatever programs you're using could change how you do things. But some of the things to consider are rather than students using their own devices, where they sort of have to upload programs, which could be a little bit of a security concern for you. Think about if you've got an old laptop, can you keep that as a dedicated student laptop that's still got all the programs, but has a dedicated student login? Other things to consider is if you are doing that, rather than having like every student has their own login details, just set up a generic student login, and that, you know, maybe you change the password at the end of each placement, but you have full control of all the different sort of accounts, and you can oversee what the students are accessing. Other things to consider is, you know, sometimes it's more like they're actually not accessing private patient notes, it's more for their own research or things like that. So, you know, they might be able to use their own device for those sorts of things. Again, just keeping in mind what they're using it for and what the privacy concerns could be. Another little thing, I think most clinicians these days are moving away from hard copy notes, but obviously if you are a bit of a pen and paper person still, then it's going to be a lot harder to offer a student placement if you've only got a home office with paper notes and you're wanting the student to do some work and they're not in your home office. So again, in those sorts of things, it could be more of a short observational junior type placement or a project placement that actually may work a little bit better for that everyday type access to what they need to access. Community travel is question 5. So will the student be able to easily travel to client appointments? Consider cost to the student if using their own vehicle. So you've probably seen in the media, recording this in May 2024, placement poverty is a big issue where, you know, the cost of actually going on placements is a lot for students and is actually deterring them from being able to get through their degree. So we need to be mindful that we can't just assume if we're a community mobile therapist that a student will be able to drive their own vehicle and meet us everywhere. Lots of reasons why it's not ideal anyway, but also it's just that the sheer cost may be more than some students can afford. So technical terms, most university policies will allow students to drive their own cars, but again, it's just thinking about that cost to the student. You might get your fuel reimbursed. Maybe you've got capacity as a company to reimburse the student's fuel. Not many do though. So just thinking about what your ability is. Could also think about some other strategies. So if you're a supervisor that normally just travels from home, think about, is there sort of scope for the duration of that placement to be able to change what you're doing? So can you meet at a central meeting place, or if there is a work office, can you go into the office and start your day and pick up the student from there every day, even if it's what you don't normally do? Again, just thinking of how you could do that, how long you could sustain that. Maybe you could do it quite easily for a 2 to 4 week placement, but you'd find it really tough for a 10-week. Keep that in mind when making sort of the offer in terms of which offer is going to suit your needs as well. So that's one thing. And the other thing to keep in mind as well is that if you're not, you know, traveling in a car with the student because you're meeting at a central place to start your day, there's lots of lost opportunities where you would normally do that ad hoc supervision. You know, sitting in a car as a mobile therapist, perfect opportunity to talk about the session that's planning up or to reflect on the session that you've just completed. If you're traveling in separate cars, I mean, there's always calling each other, I suppose, if that's hands-free is an option, but, you know, some students may be nervous drivers and they can't actually concentrate on that, or it's too distracting for them to get the most out of their supervision session. So thinking about other alternatives, if you're not traveling with each other, then you're going to have to find extra time in your schedule anyway to provide that extra ad hoc support and debriefing sessions. So it can be a little bit of a juggle and a trade-off. So again, just thinking about all those things, whatever you decide, whatever it is that you can offer or you can't offer, just be very explicit with the university when you're making your offer, so that the students are fully informed of what they're signing up for when they accept or sort of put their preference down for your offer. So if you can't offer any sort of compensation for travel, they're just going to have to drive everywhere and meet you everywhere. Give them a bit of indication of kind of like how many kilometers per day they might be driving or the types of locations they're driving, and they can decide whether that's something that they're able to sign up for. Okay, so number 6, which is all about supervision. So can you facilitate regular ad hoc and formal supervision and feedback sessions, even if you're working remotely? So as I mentioned before, sitting in a car as a mobile therapist is a good opportunity for ad hoc sessions. But if you're completely working from home separately, then you need to think of some other ways that you can block out that time for supervision and really make it an important part of what you're prioritizing in the placement as a supervisor. So some things that you could consider is maybe blocking out regular time before you sort of, as soon as you know when the placement is happening, block out those times and stick to them so that appointments don't overtake that supervision time. Making sure that you've got some ad hoc supervision opportunities. So if you're working from home, and you're using something like Microsoft Teams, can you use your busy or free status so that the students know when they can interrupt you for a quick question, because you're not on a call with a different client or in another meeting. Just so maybe using that really, really strictly so they know when you're free or not free. And as I said, the other tip where there is traveling together in the community-based ones is a good way that you're kind of billing for your travel time anyway. You're not sort of having to cut back on any of those hours if, depending on sort of what you're discussing, it's appropriate to do it there. And we'll go to the next section. Is all about self-directed learning. So are you able to offer productive learning experiences without the student needing to be with you all the time? So this is something that's sometimes a little bit tricky for supervisors that maybe went through their own university placements in a bit of an apprenticeship model where they basically follow their supervisor everywhere. Nowadays, students are much used to lots of other different models. Some long arm supervision where they don't have a supervisor on site. They might be working in peer groups as well and using each other as resources. So just keep in mind that you don't have to be with the student all the time for them to be learning. And if you're thinking about, how you can set this up well and maybe scaffolding some self-directed learning time, then there's lots of benefits. So I always say it's better to have quality over quantity in terms of the learning opportunities you're providing. So don't just feel you have to jam pack their day from start to finish, seeing clients. You'll probably find they can learn a lot more if you actually schedule breaks between clients where they can do their self-directed learning. So it could be doing some research to prepare for the session. It could be practicing doing the assessment or the treatment that they're going to have a go at leading in the session, and just reflecting on how they went and what they need to change or improve for next time. Particularly with placement poverty students working part-time as well as they're doing their placements as the only way really to survive and to get through their uni degree, really need to be mindful of not overloading them during their placement hours and expecting them to do all that self-directed learning, reflection, planning outside when they're at home, because often they're needing to work. And I think if you do scatter it during the day, it just helps consolidate their learning without overwhelming them. So something to keep in mind. You can also think about taking on 2 students, maybe super daunting. I'd maybe do a test run with 1 student first if you've never done it before. But if you've got a bit of a sort of a larger team, maybe at least a few clinicians, sometimes having 2 students at the same time can actually free up supervisor time, because they can work with each other, spend that self-directed learning time practicing skills with each other, rather than having to come and do it with you. Plus also they'll ask each other questions. So rather than you having to repeat everything multiple times or them being too scared to ask you a question, they can use each other as resources. And then by the time they do come to you, often it's a lot more of a thought through question that they're asking you. Another option for self-directed learning is to think about setting up a project component. So it could be, that supervisor's flat out busy and they know that they're just going to need one day where the student's not there asking them questions, or they don't need to worry about what the student's up to next. So having a built-in project component where it's 1 day a week or half a day a week often works really well, and you can flag that with the university beforehand. Obviously, making sure it's a project with some sort of clinical value is going to be most useful. Don't just send them doing admin tasks and things like that. I'll have some more resources about project placements coming out soon, hopefully a course and maybe some resources. But if you do have any questions about project placements in the meantime, feel free to reach out. Billing, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but basically if you're working in the private sector, you really need to have a good understanding of what activities you can and cannot bill for when students are involved in or leading a session. So for example, NDIS, on their website, they say you can't actually be billing the clients or the participants for student-led sessions or the students' time because we're not paying the student themselves. They can definitely be involved in placements. And if the supervisor has had to have any input to that participant's session in planning it, supervising it, being involved in it, then you can still bill for the supervisor's time. But when the OT student is doing everything by themselves, maybe one of those final year students that's managing a small caseload by the end of their placement, technically we shouldn't be billing for their time. Happy to answer questions around that. And there's lots of different, it's a bit of a grey, open for interpretation. Different companies will do different things, but basically just keep in mind things like if you had 4th year student, you think, yep, they can take on a small caseload, If you're clinic-based, and that means they're actually going to take up one of your treatment spaces that a therapist can't use and bill fully for, then that could impact some of your billable KPIs and things like that. So just keep that in mind in terms of what you're expecting students will be able to do and how that might impact the participants that you can actually bill for their time. At the end of the day as well, just keeping in mind that in the private sector, you're still responsible for the quality of the service provided. Clients generally are still paying either through their own funding package or out of their own pocket, and they may choose that they don't want students to provide that service. So just keeping in mind how you might make it creative for students to be involved, whether they can do things, have more free sessions with the students and they're not actually being billed for it. Hopefully that's helpful for you there, but happy to answer extra questions if you've got them. Extra support. So do you have time to provide the student with a high level of support if they were to experience difficulty? So this is all well and good planning for the student that comes, everything goes smoothly, sails through, but keep in mind that there is a small percentage, and it's not a huge percentage, but there are a small percentage of students that will struggle on their placements for whatever reason. It could be sort of having trouble with the learning side of things. There could be things happening outside of placement. But you just need to keep in mind that if you're going to offer a placement, that you do have a little bit of capacity or reserve at the time of the placement to give extra support than you anticipated initially, or that you would normally need to provide if the student was to experience difficulty. So if you find yourself in a situation when the student's there having a look at, are there things in my workload that I'd be able to cut out for that short time where I need to support the students more, making sure you're engaging with the university early so that they can help guide you through what you could do. And if you do have a team of therapists, drawing on multiple team members to maybe give different perspective of how the student is learning or how they could be taught the skills in case there's something there that's not just working, or to give the immediate supervisor a bit of a break from the extra supervision they might be needing to provide. And finally, placement type. So have you considered the pros and cons of different placement models for your workplace? So there's so many different ways that you can host a student placement. Universities, while they traditionally will still give their offers out sort of in blocks of placements, there is a lot of capacity for many to be able to offer more flexible placements, part-time placements, split clinical and project placements, just project placements. Basically have a think about what you can offer and then reach out to some of your local universities to see if they think that there's something that would actually fit how they operate their student placements. So yeah, basically keep that in mind. Think that there's lots of different options. Don't assume nothing is possible unless you've actually had a chat with some universities about it. In the book, there's a link where you can actually book in to have a quick 15-minute chat with me if you've got a bit of an idea and you're just not sure and want to run it past somebody before you reach out to a university. I'm happy to have that chat with you. Also, when you're sort of thinking about what placement to offer, think about the supervisor's experience level. So junior clinicians, generally not great for them to be taking on those final year students, but they're probably fine maybe to supervise someone on an observational type early year placement. All these other things as well. I think that the main tip here is basically go back through all those other questions that we've just covered, and that will hopefully guide you in the right direction of what sort of placement you might be able to offer. Few further resources just at the end. So as I mentioned, there's lots of other things besides student support resources on my website. So there's downloadable resources and webinars for OTs and OT students, and some might be applicable to other allied health as well. Some online courses. So the OT guide to completing a functional capacity assessment is for OTs, but the one on 10 steps to NDIS report writing success and managing challenging situations in the NDIS are for all allied health. So you're welcome to check them out, including some of them all bundled up together in a starter kit. There's an online journal club for OTs with on-demand and live sessions happening regularly. I do offer individual one-to-one group coaching sessions or supervision sessions and consultancy services, more for sort of the business managers. And if you want to throw a lot of those things all together, then I do now have a Your OT Tutor membership called the Your OT Tutor Alliance, or the Yacht Alliance, which for a small monthly fee, you can access live workshop, live Q&A session, lots of on-demand content, sometimes the journal club sessions when they're running, and discounts on all of these courses as well. So worth checking out if you don't have access to a regular CPD program in your own workplace, or maybe you're looking to want to offer something to your OTs. This is an OT specific membership. it could be something that you could sign up as part of sort of the welcome package when you have a new recruit. A little bit of space for writing notes that you can add on there, but hopefully that was helpful for you. Just to quickly finish off, the Clinical Educator Starter Kit that I mentioned, there's a flyer that you can download from the website. Again, I'll show you that in a second. This just tells you what's in it. So that, I know it's probably tiny for you to see, but that is a list of all the different resources that I've already created for you that you're free to adapt and use however you like for your own student placements. And a few little tips about why it's going to hopefully save you a few headaches and just give you some ideas for how you can really boost the quality of the learning experiences that you're offering to students. Where can you find all this? So this is from if I go back to the main website, you see you can find all these things here in the Learning Library, Supervising Students. It'll take you to, this is the guide. You can download the guide that I've just talked you through. If you want to find out more about this Clinical Educator Starter Kit, that's the flyer there. And this will take you to where you can actually find out more. There's even a few sneak peeks. So these are some of the resources that are part of the kit. This is a shortened version of one of the case study self-directed learning resources in there for students. I've run a similar session where I've answered questions like this and went through the first, when the workbook was first created, and answered a few extra questions about student placements. You can join that via the learning management system and watch that recording. And this is what I mentioned about the Clinical Educator Resource Kit Challenge. So if you think you want to have a go at creating your own kit of resources, this will give you some ideas of what you can do. So for example, the things that you'll be talked through what to create is, a template for the pre-placement email correspondence, a handout for students with FAQs about your workplace, a handout for clients about working with students, self-directed learning case study, placement evaluation survey. So they're the things that you can learn to do in the challenge. But like I said, the kit already has all these things available for you if you're interested in saving yourself a little bit of time. And then the final thing is, if you would like to have a quick 15-minute chat, you can book a call here, ask me questions, or you're welcome to send me a quick message or email if you'd like to find out more. And I do have a YouTube channel, and I do have some recordings already up there about student placements, and I'll keep adding to them slowly over time, but you can jump on these links and just see some of the things that I've already got available. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. Do you have any questions? Let me know. I'm always happy to support other clinicians that are wanting to support our students. But thanks for watching.